I never heard of this movie, and I was just scrolling through some films. Saw this and thought, what's that? Figured I'd give it a blind buy. So this movie came out. When did this movie come out? 1991. And I just recently saw it a few days ago during Romantic Movie Month. On that note, I wouldn't consider this a romantic movie. Not so romantic. Can't say anyone's being romanced in this movie. But it made the cut. A film of power and astonishment, as serious as it is kinky. LA Times. It is definitely a kinky movie. More taboo kinks, in a sense. Kinks that, you really aren't sharing with many people, if that's your thing. Actually, in that sense, it's one of those movies, if you're watching it, and has our hero here, her name's makes the rounds. Well, let me back up a little bit. I haven't even told you what the movie's about. So let's take a look at the back. A treat for the eyes. That's, this movie is really beautifully shot. I wasn't expecting the cinematography to be so good, so I agree with this. Erotic sex or dangerous fantasy. I don't know. In the most lavish penthouses, visible only through keyholes. Let me center this a little bit. Here we go. There exists a dangerous and erotic world. High-paid prostitutes who specialize in high stakes games make the rounds. The richer the client, the wilder the ride. When fantasy gets too rough for one young call girl, escaping becomes her reality. Okay, yeah, I don't really feel that's a good description of the movie. And this isn't even our hero. This is just another call girl. She, what's her name? I forget her name. But she's a dominatrix in the movie, and our hero here takes quite a liking to her, seems to admire her quite a bit. So it really only follows this one character. And she is a call girl, a prostitute, through an agency dealing with assuming clients with a lot of money. And she goes from client to client, and each client has their own kinks, in a sense. But her motivations are unclear. I don't want to call it a disturbing movie. I guess it depends on how. Actually, no, it's a disturbing movie. Some of the kinks in this are pretty disturbing. And going back to what I was saying earlier, it's like one of these movies, if you're watching it, and like your reaction is the opposite. Like, oh wow, this is getting me going, I'm enjoying this. For some of the clients, you have a very complicated love life, I imagine. So, you do fear for her safety, in a sense, but not in the way of a thriller where there's, physical harm that's going to happen to her. There's consent in this movie. And so as she goes from one client to the next, there was a love in her life from a few years ago, and she's still in love with this man. Apparently it just ended abruptly. She didn't get any closure. And then she finds out the man in question is married, and she's trying to decide, is it worth pursuing? Does she confront this man? Does she see this man again? And as she's with her clients, it's difficult to tell her level of enjoyment in the sense of, is this a profession that she wants to do. Her colleagues seem a bit more comfortable in their surroundings than she does. So, one of the things besides the cover that caught my eye was that Ryuichi Sakamoto composed the score for this movie. There's very little music in this movie, though. There's really only a couple pieces by Sakamoto, and he's one of my favorite composers. He recently passed away, unfortunately, due to cancer, but he's probably, whether you realize it or not, there's probably a movie you've seen that Ryuichi Sakamoto has scored. The writer-director's name rang a bell as well, Ryu Murakami, and initially I was thinking, is that the author, Murakami, the other author, the guy who did like Wind Up Bird Chronicle and what have you. And Ryu Murakami is an author as well, short stories. This movie is a short story of his called Topaz. I haven't read the short story, and I don't know how many movies he's directed, but so he wrote the short story, he wrote the screenplay, and he directed this movie, so by all accounts this really is his movie. But I was thinking, where have I heard that name before? Then I realized that Ryu Murakami, he wrote the story, the short story, Audition, and I have seen Audition. That's a Takashi Miike movie, and Takashi Miike is a really prolific director that is notorious as well. And in a previous video of mine, I talked about a video store that I was lucky to have in my neighborhood that had a lot of foreign films, and it was one of the reasons why I was able to watch Chunky Express. I think that was a video I mentioned it. They also had a lot of Japanese movies that I wasn't familiar with at all, and I really got into Takashi Miike for a while. I wouldn't consider this, well, Takashi Miike movies are certainly an acquired taste, and this is too, absolutely. But this isn't like a horror film. There's no shocking violence in this movie, and that's not to say all of Takashi Miike movies have shocking violence in them, but it's kind of, for me, somewhat of an expectation that what the heck am I in for if I'm about to watch one of his movies. So that may give you an idea of like the tone of this picture, if you're familiar with any of Takashi Miike movies. But it also at times really reminded me of like Cronenberg, Lynch at times. So if any of that sounds of interest, you may find some enjoyment here. It is a difficult watch, though. Some of the, well, I guess it depends on whatever your fantasies are, but there were a couple instances in this movie where it was very squeamish for me. I was like, oh my goodness, okay, yeah, not a turn on for me. But let's go ahead and open up the case here. I'll try to be quiet. Actually, let me move away from the mic. That wasn't too bad. So you have a clear case here with some inner artwork. Got some discard here. Let's take this out. Oh, how about that? Okay, this is actually two different covers. This isn't just inner art, so we have the reversible cover. I prefer this cover, but this is pretty good too. So that's cool. That's a little unexpected. I don't think what is this? Earth Classics. Unearthed Films. I don't think I have anything else from that line, but this is a pretty decent packaging for this movie. And this looks to be identical to the back here, so yeah, you just reverse it if you want. And this does come with the original audio. I don't know if there was a dub. I wasn't really paying attention to that. If there is, okay, great, if you prefer to watch a movie dubbed, but I don't. So original Japanese audio. The subtitles, that's the only time I've seen the movie, so it's hardly hard to judge subtitles, especially if you don't speak the language in question. But there were a few moments where characters were speaking and there was no captions to go along with their lines. So sometimes that happens and you realize, oh, it was something just completely throwaway, or the character was agreeing again, like saying the same thing twice, essentially. But I really have no idea, so whether there's any gaps in the translation, I'm not sure, but I didn't have any difficulty following this movie with the translations provided. And from a grammatical standpoint, everything seemed to be pretty sound. So sometimes you buy a foreign film and you don't really know the quality of the captions, and again, if you don't speak the language, you may never know the exact quality, but you can usually pick up on something that feels stilted, or grammatical errors are very easy to spot. And I really wasn't seeing any of that here, so that was good. And if you're wondering, yes, this scene is in the movie, and it's quite extended. Yes, a nice presentation here. Again, this isn't really a movie I'd recommend to anyone. I feel like you'd have to have a pretty open mind to go into this movie. But it was better than I expected. I think I was thinking in my head something more depending on your age, like a Skinamax type movie. You know, it's like, it's 11 midnight, you have cable, you turn on Cinemax, you know, there's usually some movie on. As a kid, that was really exciting, and it really wasn't that at all. So if you are interested in like the dark underbelly of Japan, this also one thing too I thought was pretty different. There is a lot of drug use in this movie. I have no idea if this movie was controversial when it came out in Japan, or if it, wasn't allowed to be screened or whatever. So I'm not speculating on that. But in general, drug use in Japan, and especially I feel like the Japanese movies I've seen probably more than most people, I imagine, unless you live in Japan. It's not very common. There is an exceptional amount of drug use in this movie. So that was a little bit different. But that part of Japan, that part of Tokyo, these shadowy figures that, have their second lives, you may find some enjoyment in this movie. At the very least, it's much better shot than I was expecting, and the performances, they were great. The main character, the protagonist here, there was just this unspoken conflict. It was a very, I'm trying to think of the right word here. It was a difficult performance, besides like the physicality aspect of it, but it seemed impenetrable at times, trying to understand her motivations, and it is a movie that I would like to revisit at some point, so I am